Hello, and welcome to another episode of Child Abuse Awareness with Darlene J. Clark. Be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. Please don't forget to hit the thumbs up, to hit the bell icon, to subscribe. We are here to support other survivors and other victims who are not fortunate enough to have made it. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted for copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips a balance in favor of fair use. In Matthew 18, verse 6, but whoso shall fear one of these little ones which believe in me, it were better for him that a millstone were hanged about his neck, that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. I'll make sure to do the justice one, because these people need to stand up and help this guy, help him get the paperwork, the answers, the justice he deserves for his brother. In Isaiah 1:17, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. In the drop down menu in the information, I dropped the links down where you can click on them and go to the change.org, sign the petition. You don't have to donate money. You can just share it with other people so that they can sign it as well. The more people that sign it, better it will be. I appreciate y'all for coming. Hello, Chris. Thank you so much for coming. And hello, Eric, as well for coming. So that's your home state as well. Appreciate each and every one of y'all. Without further ado, let's get the story. At times I'll be reading and then I have to mute my mic, but I'll let y'all know in advance when I have to mute my mic, okay? So bear with me on that. Please bear with me on that. Here it is on change.org. Over half a century, still no prosecution and or justice for the deaths of 4 children. 4 children, y'all. 4 children dead within 17.5 years, having a common thread of similar injuries. 3 with the same suspect, 2 within 10 months of each other, 1 unsolved, no one held accountable, all in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. The issue: before you begin reviewing this petition, I respectfully request that you take a few minutes to watch this video. Be certain to watch 2 videos I've linked below this video as well. Thank you. Click on my link, on this link. First, I guess I need to go ahead and mute my mic so that we can go listen to a song that someone sang, and you'll get to see on the page who the person is who had sang the song, my brother. So let me go ahead and let me mute my cam. Not my cam, but my mic. Thank you. I'm sorry.
One of us lays here in peace now. The other one stands here in pain. And I know your battles have ended, but My war is just underway, one I can't fight. My brother, I'll miss you tonight. One of us lays here sleeping, the other one is dying for sleep. I only wish we could trade places, and it would be you on your knees. I can't make this right. My brother, I miss you tonight and tomorrow and forever, until I fall to your right. My brother, I'll miss you tonight. I can't make this right. My brother, I'll miss you tonight and tomorrow and forever, until I fall to your right. My brother, I'll miss you tonight. One of our bodies is resting, the other one tends in despair. And I've looked to the clouds for some answers, cried while the earth holds you there, 6 feet from light. My brother, I'll miss you tonight. My brother, I'll miss you tonight. My brother, I'll miss you this life.
Let's see if y'all can hear me now. Okay. This is how Lillian Drizza Bedford got away with murder. I'll read what's across the screen. Okay. Bruises on the body of little Edward Stecker. Before receiving the fatal slap from his foster mother, suggests he had been mistreated physically for some time. Dr. Joseph W. Spellman, medical examiner, said Friday. That's him right here. Edward John Stecker was only 2 years old when he and 4-year-old brother Charles, went to live with their new mommy and daddy near Germantown Avenue in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Here's Seymour Street, a picture of the house. Charles, Eddie, and baby sister Donna entered into the child care system. Due to the reported abuse by their natural mother. Here they are right here. The 3 children were temporarily placed together in a fun and loving home. It would be 1 year before a new foster home was found. However, there was a condition. They would only accept boys. On February the 15th, 1967, Charles and Eddie moved to the home of Donald and Lillian Bedford. There they are right here. Sorry, y'all, I got tears on Seymour Street. I got tears in my eyes, sorry. Can't help but have emotions. Leaving sister Donna behind. This is the modern day Seymour Street home. Charles recalled, when we went in, there were toys and a crib ready for us. It seemed like a good place to be to a 4-year-old. Donald Bedford was a 45-year-old house painter. Lillian was a 43-year-old housewife. They were married 13 years and had no children of their own. The couple received $24 a week for each child. When asked of Charles as to what happened, he directly stated, it was like Jekyll and Hyde. He noted that when Donald was home, everything was fine. But when he wasn't, Lillian would terrify and abuse them. On the 13th day, February the 28th, 1967, Charles and Eddie would endure such immense suffering and abuse that it would take the life of 2-year-old Eddie and put Charles in the hospital with a shattered arm for many months. Eddie and Charles had shared the same room. Charles in his bed and Eddie in his crib. Charles recounts the details of that night as if he was still there to see it. Eddie was crying, standing up in his crib. There's a picture of him. While Charles lay in his own bed trying to quiet Eddie. Lillian was only a few steps away. On the other side of the door, talking to someone on the telephone. Eddie could not stop crying. Charles was worried. He knew they were not allowed to cry. Within moments, Lillian burst into the room and with a plastic bowling pin, striking Eddie so hard that it knocked him out of his crib and onto the floor. Charles ran to the aid of his little brother, holding him in his arms as Eddie lay dying. But still holding Eddie, Lillian began to beat Charles in order to pry Eddie away. Lillian took and bathed Eddie, washing away the blood from his face and ears, and tidied up their room before calling for an ambulance. Lillian told police that Eddie had fallen out of his crib. Charles told the police that his new mommy had hit his little brother. Lillian was arrested for involuntary manslaughter and assault. She was held without bail. March 4th. March 4th, 1967. By comparison with the head injuries, the bruises on the body were of a minor nature, Spellman said. Thank you. But he added that first, they were the kind of bruises usually seen in cases of parental punishment. Dr. Spellman said the pathologist report on the autopsy performed on the 2-year-old boy stated death is due to head injuries not consistent with a single fall. There are numerous bruises of varying ages on the face and back of the right shoulder. The fall alone could not have killed the child. Death certificate of Edward John Stecker. Edward John Stecker's death was caused by subdural hemorrhage, bilateral, a collection of blood outside the brain, usually caused by severe head injuries. His death was ruled a homicide. According to a Philadelphia Inquirer article dated March 4th, 1967, boy age 2 mistreated before fatal slap, autopsy shows. Dr. Spellman disclosed the name of another child who died in Mrs. Bedford's care 1 year earlier. Do what? Brent Garcia. And that suspicious marks had been found on his body. The medical examiner said the body of 2-year-old Brent Garcia bore a severe bruise on the scalp, bruises of the head, and scratches on the side of the chest. They could very well be associated with parental abuse, Dr. Spellman said. The autopsy of the Garcia boy failed to determine neither the cause nor the manner of death. A letter sent to the city welfare department, cleared Mrs. Bedford of blame in that case. Wow. Due to the fact that the medical examiner's office could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that parental abuse contributed to the death. Well, I thank Charles for speaking up for his brother. So here's a death certificate of Brent Garcia. Dr. Spellman said the story his office was told about the Garcia boy was that he had fallen twice while in her care. Once off of a rocking horse, and another time a fall onto the back of his head. On one occasion, she had taken him to the Philadelphia General Hospital because of these injuries, Dr. Spellman said. And apparently the child was released back in her care. Y'all get that? Brent's cause of death was ruled undetermined after autopsy. Welfare Commissioner Randolph E. Wise said his office did not see the autopsy report on the Garcia child, but took the medical examiner's assurance at face value. Wise said Mrs. Bedford and her husband Donald, age 45, passed a routine background check. It's okay. The couple checked out well in our investigation, he said. It's okay, Chris. Everybody should be upset. It's regrettable. Wise said of the placement of the Stecker boy in the Bedford home. But upon review of the circumstances, we find it difficult to pinpoint where we erred. In light of this, it was made known baby Brent would be released to the Bedfords for the very last time. In 1966, Lily and her husband Donald were given permission to bury Brent Garcia. It was also learned that under the advisement of high-profile lawyer Charles Peruto Sr., Lillian admitted herself into a mental institution to show that she was not mentally sound to be held on trial. Donald was later interviewed by Joe McGinnis, a then popular Inquirer columnist. He wrote the only public narrative of Donald Bedford's life after his wife's arrest. In McGinnis' portrait, Don Bedford staggers through his days swigging whiskey and sobbing. A broken man who loved his wife and always wanted children of his own. Believe it or not, Bedford told McGinnis she's a dang fine woman. Nope, she's not. And I wish you could have seen her wonderful she was with kids. How wonderful she was with kids. She had a nursery school class at our church. Oh, gee. And the things she did with the children there, it was just a front, man. Were just terrific. McGinnis summarized the husband's dilemma. It was not easy for him to decide what to do. At first, he hated her. He had waited all his life for children, and she had killed them when they came. He could have walked out and said to heck with her and tried to find a new life, but instead he hired the best lawyer he could get because Lillian Bedford was self admitted. This enabled her to leave when she wanted to. Her time institutionalized was only long enough to get her out of the mind of the public. Wow. In a Philadelphia Inquirer article titled Cleared in the 1966 Case, Foster Mother is Held in Death as Second Child, it was reported that the cause of Eddie's death warranted a new investigation into the death of 2-year-old Brent Chucky Garcia. But after that article, news on the investigation, similarly updated reports of both Donald and Lillian Bedford, and any trail of public record seemed to end. So they did not investigate everybody. They did not. Evidently, that is until now. That lady, almost 53 years later. This begs to ask several questions. What were the requirements and qualifications of those overseeing the children in the system and those functioning as foster parents? How long was Brent Garcia in her care before he met her fury and died? Were there other children placed in her care after Eddie? What about the ones before Brent? Where are they now? How did this get as far as it did and no one took notice? To get some of these answers, we need to back up a bit and start at the beginning. I want to make it known that Charles Stecker has continued to search for answers pertaining to his little brother's death and has hit every obstacle possible. Y'all please hit. Not only do these records contain pertinent information leading to the death of Eddie, they help pinpoint what went wrong in the system that allowed Lillian and Donald Bedford to continue fostering children. Following the death of 2-year-old toddler Brent Garcia, according to Charles, every effort made to have vital records and documents made available was met either with a resounding no. Wow. Or he was simply told they no longer exist. Charles believes that the information provided in such said documents would act as a tool in establishing preventative action that would aid in ending crimes against children. They would serve in formulating perimeters which would set guidelines, policies, and restrictions into motion. Those measured steps taken would work to ensure that all children in care are safe and hold child services and family courts accountable. Charles has now put forth a petition in order to obtain those records. My brother's keeper, see that? Please sign the petition and share Eddie's story. So let me close that one out. This one. Close out that one. So here we go with this one. Trying to make it bigger right here, sorry. So Randolph E. Weiss, the Welfare Department Commissioner in 1967, was quoted by a multitude of news outlets, stating that Eddie Stecker's death was the first of its kind in the history of the city's foster parent program. But in April 1966, this was proven not to be true. Edward Stecker would become the second child, even though murder was not proven with the first child. It should have been, though, enough to disqualify the Bedfords from the foster care program altogether. In part one, we revealed that two little boys aged 2 years old died while in the care of Mrs. Lillian Bedford. This is 29 East Seymour Street. And how Lillian Bedford was never convicted for their deaths. During the hearing of March the 4th, 1967, it's down there, she was cleared into the 66 case. Philadelphia pathologists, they're having trouble now playing a video, so okay. I need to go ahead and remove this out of the way right here. And let me mute my thing so that you could hear this audio.
Hello from Charles J. Stecker Jr. I am a childhood abuse prevention and intervention specialist who utilizes my own life experiences as both my educational background and platform from which I write and speak on empowering children with their right to live an abuse-free childhood, in addition to enlightening all adults of their responsibilities to being positive parental role models, whether they have children or not. Children need their child welfare system overhauled. The family was designed by God to be that child welfare system, not the government or non-government agencies. Let's get to reconstructing and strengthening the child welfare system. It is our responsibility as adults to protect the rights of the children. The only adult excused from this calling is any adult who was never a child.
So now, now let's go back to the petition here. So, is hello, my name is Edward John Stecker. I was born on April the 11th, 1964. Can y'all hear me? Give me a one, please. Let me know if you can hear me after I change the settings. Thank you. I came into the world weighing in at 7 pounds 1 ounce, and I was 20 inches long. I had brown hair and eyes. I was born at the Naval Hospital in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At the time of my birth, my mommy, she likes to spell it that way, was a stay-at-home mommy, and my daddy was serving our country in the United States Coast Guard. I also have an older brother named Charlie. According to my baby book, let me scroll up a little bit. According to my baby book, my daddy really liked the name Edward, and my mommy liked John, after my grandpa Stecker. So it's named Edward John Stecker. In my baby book, it says I look like my daddy except for my nose. A whole bunch of people came to visit me when I first arrived home, and I received all kinds of gifts, toys, my favorite, clothes, bottles, and furniture. Of course, Mommy and Daddy were there along with my big brother, Charlie. My grandma and Grandpa Force was there too. My Grandpa Stecker was there as well. My Aunt Pat, my Uncle Ralph Field, and my Aunt Mary were all there, along with 4 more friends and family. When I was 2.5 months old, while I was sleeping, my mommy took my footprints. They looked so cute. My first smile was when I was 5 days old. Excuse me. And my first real laugh was when I was 4 months old. I sat up on my own at 10 months old, and I took my first steps just 2 weeks after my second birthday. My first tooth came in about 3 weeks after my big brother's birthday when I was almost 8 months old. Oh, his birthday is November the 8th, 1962. I began eating solid food 2 weeks after my first birthday. My favorite was mashed potatoes, and I also enjoyed chewing on a sirloin steak. Yes, 2 deaths. That's right, oh lady oh. It's more than that. There's more going on too. I was 9 months old when I said my first words. They were Dada and Mama. At 10 months, I began to talk more clearly. My mama used to cut my hair herself, and she put 3 locks of it in my baby book too. My hair was light brown. I went to my first for my first ride in a car when I was just 5 days old. For some reason, later that day, I had to go back to the hospital, so I got my first bus and subway ride on the same day. I'm not sure why though. Mommy didn't write anything about that in my baby book. I was 2 weeks old when I rode in my first coach, and 13 months old when I got my first ride on a merry-go-round. For my first Christmas, I got lots and lots of toys and some clothes too. I also like to play with the Christmas tree lights and decorations. Remember, a lot of kids love to do that, right? Love to play with the Christmas decorations. On my first birthday, I received mostly clothes and a toy or two. On my second birthday, I again received more clothes and a few more toys. When I was 17 months old, I and my big brother got a baby sister. Her name is Donna. At 1 year and 10 months old, I weighed almost 24 pounds. Right around my second birthday, I got measles. Hmm, did something strange happen? My brother Charlie had to go to the hospital for an emergency. He hurt his head somehow, but he never came back home, which made me sad. That's where everything in my baby book stops. While I and my sister were waiting for our brother to come back home, some people came to see Mommy. These people then took me and my sister for a car ride without our mommy and daddy. I was a little scared at first, but when we arrived at a house and went inside, there was my big brother that made me happy again. He came over and gave me and my sister a big hug. Then he handed me his teddy bear. I found out we were going to have a new mommy and daddy and a whole bunch of new brothers and sisters. We were there for a year. Excuse me, and I was having lots of fun, a lot more fun than at my original mommy and daddy's house. Then one day, excuse me, then one day, some people came and took me and my brother for a car ride. I remember the date was February 15th, 1967. It was the last day I would ever see my little sister, and that made me sad. My big brother and I were taken to a home where we were introduced to a new mommy and daddy. This is all so confusing to me, and this new house is very scary. The new mommy is very mean, and when the new daddy isn't around, too. She does all kinds of mean stuff to me and my brother. She even told us about the boogeyman, which scared me and my brother to death. Speaking of death, I may as well tell you this now. On February 28th, 1967, only one day before me and my brother would have been with our new mommy and daddy for 2 weeks, I learned what death really meant. You see, on that day, excuse me, take a breath. I met Mr. Death face to face. My new mommy made sure I met Mr. Death because she murdered me. I was only 2 years old. I want to tell you this before I go. My big brother tried so hard to save me, and as I lay there down on the floor, I could hear him screaming so loud. I knew he was getting beat really bad. Well, it's getting dark now, and it feels like I'm floating away to somewhere, so I'm going to have to get going. Excuse me. I am now my big brother's angel, and he calls me Little Eddie, or Charlie's angel. I like them both. I carry my favorite toy around with me in heaven. It's my big brother's teddy bear. That was his favorite, but he gave it to our original daddy to put with me when they buried me. Big brother will have to take over from here. Okay, here's Charlie's version now. Hello, I am Charles J. Stecker Jr., also known as Charlie. And oh, yes, I wrote all of the above as if I was my brother. There wasn't a lot written in Eddie's baby book, but I wanted to share with you what there so you'll know a little bit about my brother. As you know now, the reason I had to write on his behalf is that Eddie is no longer with us. I plead with you to consider signing the petition and sharing it with everyone you know. Encourage them to read it, sign, and share it as well. You will better understand the importance of my plea after you read through this. On February 28th, 1967, at the tender age of 2 years old, my younger brother was murdered by the hands of a foster mother, Lillian Bedford. We had been assigned to her home by the Philadelphia Department of Human Services Contract Agency. the Philadelphia Society to Protect Children, now known as Turning Points for Children. A foster mother who just 10 months prior to our arrival had another 2-year-old boy die in her care. His name is Brent Garcia. He died in April of 1966. He lasted 4 months with her. My brother only made it 13 days. I was with my brother and witnessed his murder. I suffered a severely shattered left elbow causing my limited use of my arm to this very day. In 1981, not too long before my 19th birthday, I sought to obtain the records in reference to my brother's murder. Little did I know that it would take me through an arduous process and a 30-plus year journey that I am still on. Over that 30-plus year period, I have on numerous occasions sought to obtain anything in reference to my brother's murder. As a young man, I was at the Free Library at Philadelphia's main branch day after day looking through old newspapers via microfiche dating from April 1966 up to December 1967. I found every clipping I could possibly find in reference to my brother's murder, and there were many. I researched at Temple University and their Library of Archival Records, the University of Pennsylvania's archival records, and anywhere else that I thought I could get more information. I was able to obtain a certified copy of the medical examiner's certificate of death for my brother through our birth father. Besides all of the other information on it, there are two very significant words clearly typed and in capital letters. In Section 21A, titled Circumstances of Significant Injury, you would find the word beaten. In Section 23, titled Manner of Death, you would find the word homicide. Over the next 30 years, equipped with this information, I reached out to the point of exhaustion to the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, the Philadelphia Mayor's Office, the Philadelphia DHS Commissioner's Office, the Philadelphia Family Court, the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office, the Philadelphia Police, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, Turning Points for Children, and the Widow CQ Society for Assistance. I contacted an attorney after an attorney seeking legal help with this mission, only to be turned away. I even reached out to my foster mother's defense attorney, the now late A. Charles Perudo Sr., Esquire, to no avail. For your information, I harbor no malice towards Mr. Perudo. He did what he was hired to do. He kept his client out of jail. I was told over and over again throughout those 30 years that no records existed. My information and its validity were questioned. At times, even my own sanity and memory were put to the test. That until 2011. In 2011, after what I believe to have been divine intervention, arrest and investigation records were finally located by the District Attorney of Philadelphia's office. I was elated. It just so happens that I was also in the midst of having the story become the front cover news story in the Philadelphia weekly newspaper. I thought I had finally reached a portion of this journey's end. I won't go into details here. Instead, I'll put it in a link to the story so you may read it for yourself. The entire article should captivate you from the first word to the last. That's my brother on the front cover, along with his death certificate superimposed over him. The article starts on page 12 and goes to page 16. You probably have to make it a full order to see the writing. Okay, I don't think, let's see. Let me go here. It says page 12 to 16. So we'll go ahead and get over here. Here, let me make this bigger right here. There's a lost boy's decades after witnessing his brother's death, one man fills in the blanks. Charles Stecker was only 4 years old when he saw his foster mother kill his 2-year-old brother Eddie, but he remembers it like it was yesterday. She put my brother to bed, and he was crying profusely. Eddie was probably in pain because he was beat up, says Stecker. He remembers lying in a bed a few feet away as his foster mother, Lillian Bedford, placed his brother in a crib, walked downstairs, and started chatting on the telephone. Stecker watched his foster mother return to the boy's room, agitated by what she described as Eddie's persistent squalling. The Philadelphia Inquirer later reported. She came in our room. There was a plastic pin in the crib, recalls Stecker, referring to a bowling pin, a part of a children's toy bowling kit. She picked the bowling pin up and swung it at him and told him to shut his effing mouth. When she hit him, she caught him in the back of his head. Various newspapers reported a second blow. Either way, Eddie toppled out of the crib. His head bounced off the floor. Stecker says, I jumped out of bed, went over, and was holding him. I remember blood coming out of his ears and nose. Eddie's brain hemorrhaged. He was dying. As Stecker, now 48, relates his life-defining incidents, sentences flow like waterfalls, peppered with details called from a memory bolstered by newspaper clippings, birth, and death certificates that he carries around in a folder. Today he's also carrying a baby book with locks of Eddie's hair, scotch taped to a page. It's horrible, says Stecker. Sometimes I wish I would never remembered anything. Stecker says he held on to his brother even as his foster mom was beating him to get me off of him. Finally, she yanked it so forcefully the bones in my left arm broke. He would never straighten his arm again. Doctor suggested re-breaking and resetting the bones when he was 18, but he refused. News accounts later revealed that Bedford tidied the floor before tending to the dying baby. The Stecker says she carried Eddie to the bathroom, put him in the tub, trying to rinse the blood off. I remember her making a phone call that the police were there. 2-year-old Edward John Stecker was pronounced dead at Germantown Hospital at 10:30 p.m. on February the 28th, 1967. The death certificate lists the cause of death as subdural hemorrhage bilateral, under circumstances of significant injury. One word is typed all in caps, beaten. Eddie's funeral at St. Leo's Roman Catholic Church in Tuscany was widely reported. He was buried hugging a teddy bear, a gift from his big brother, in a small white casket in Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. The city's welfare department paid for the funeral and burial plot. Decades later, Stecker is still trying to figure out what happened. How did he and his brother end up in the hands of a killer foster mom? And what happened to her after Eddie's death? The ultimate goal is for me to be able to answer the question of what happened to the woman who killed my brother, he says. It's been hidden. The South Philly resident continues. Every time I would try to find out what happened, I run into brick walls. I was looking through the police, city records. Everyone said, there's nothing on this case. It doesn't exist. But every day he remembers it. As if by impossibly rapid evolution, Stecker has a talent, maybe even a need for details. He rattles off full names, spellings, dates, and times. The ever expanding file he carries around with him reveals a one man detective trying to solve the mystery of his own life. Stecker grew up being called Chucky, goes by Charlie now, pronounced and spelled with an H, with a shaved head, beard, tattoos, and a gold hoop earring. He looks like a TV actor typecast as either the streetwise get the job done cop or corner tough, the loudmouth who starts a bar fight. But he's none of those things. His brown eyes are kind. I can't get angry, he shrugs. I like to experience it. I'm a little afraid of it. I get hurt, but I don't have anger and rage. I never had those things. The only things his eyes well up is when he mentions how Frank Rizzo, Billy's police commissioner in 1967, once picked him up and hugged him, remembering him at the scene of the crime. Remained friends until the end of his life, says Stecker, voice cracking. Over the years, Stecker has made many attempts to dig up records to fill in the blind spots. Did his foster mother get away with murder? What exactly were he and his siblings entrusted to the city of Philadelphia to begin with? All he knew, and not even sure, is that nobody ever served a day in jail for killing his brother or shattering his bones. There was no court record, no arrest record, no record of it ever happening, he says. Finding out about his past has become urgent for Stecker because after spending his adult life working a string of jobs, managing a Roy Rogers, truck driving, catering, and raising a daughter in New Jersey, he says he had a spiritual epiphany that led him to move back to Philadelphia, where he wants to spend the rest of his life working as an advocate, as a voice for the voiceless. I came back to Philadelphia with the intention I didn't have any direction, mind you, but the intention and desire to bring attention to child abuse prevention and awareness. Before his spiritual awakening, Stecker vowed never to step foot anywhere near his birthplace. Philadelphia has no good memories for me, he says. When I left in 1981, I swore I'd never come back. He was 18 when he literally walked over the bridge to New Jersey, then joined the Coast Guard. Then 5 years ago, he says he was nudged by a divine calling. Then he read the book A Child Called It, the autobiography of a severely abused child, and it inspired him to return to Philly, face his demons, and find the truth. Since then, he's been doing renegade gigs like helping foster children find their birth mothers. He recently spoke at a Chicago Baby Jane's Foundation event, attends rallies, and works with a group called Stand Up for Kids. He's working on creating a nonprofit called Angels in honor of his brother Eddie. Currently unemployed, Stecker says he spends his $300 a week benefits check on building a website and applying for nonprofit status. There's a reason I walked through all this, and I should be using this for a purpose. For Stecker, helping other people begins with sharing his own story. And to share it, he has to know it first. 3 years ago, he started showing up at PPD headquarters, the Roundhouse, City Hall, Family Court, Temple University Library, the Free Library of Philadelphia, the Department of Human Services offices, and the District Attorney's office. He has even met with the Vido CQ Society. Billy's, let me go to the next page. I guess need to. We're at 14 and 15 now. Okay. A secret cold case club. In October of 2008, Stecker got a gig as an ambassador, aka security, he snorts, at the Union League, an old school exclusive members only club on 15th and Moravian Streets, with a chic and elite meetup and a piano man plays to an empty hallway. He wanted a job because he realized it was a Rolodex of powerful Philadelphians. Police chiefs are in there, politicians, I thought. Wow, what an opportunity. Stucker talked to anyone who would listen, both co-workers and guests, about his experiences, his dream of helping others, and his search for the missing pieces of his story. Along the way, he met many famous people, controversial former U.S. Marine Corps officer Olive North, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Black Hawk Down author Mark Bowden. He asked them all for help. When he arrived at work one day in March last year, he found a sheet of Union League notebook paper on his desk. Scribbled on it was a court docket number. Stecker still doesn't know who gave it to him. Once I got this, I am like a pit bull. I dug into this, and I wasn't letting go. I felt like something crazy was going on. Like, who's hiding what? A buddy on the PPD used a docket number to dig up the arrest record. They gave me the arrest record number of the record that the city said didn't exist. Bingo! I took this to the city and they said they still couldn't find the record. I said, I had the arrest record number. How could you say it doesn't exist? Another brick wall. But then Stecker had three chance encounters with former district attorney Lynn Abraham. Stecker randomly met Abraham at a benefit event for victims of violence and then again at the Union League. He felt he made progress with Abraham, but then he was fired for reasons he says he has formally disputed. The doors were closing again, he says. I'm at Borders one day, and who's standing in front of me but Lynn Abraham, Stecker says. She agreed to help. Abraham, who doesn't remember Stecker, I meet lots of people, lots of places, she says, adding that she's thrilled if she was able to help him. Referred Stecker to Ann Paterio, attorney and chief of the Philadelphia District Attorney's Homicide Division. Ontario referred him to Detective Robert Byrne, who declined to comment for this story through a DA spokesperson. This was only 3 months ago, says Stecker. Detective Byrne calls me within 24 hours of my phone call to Ann. Within a week of our initial interactions, Byrne calls me again and has a court record, Stecker says. Now, all of a sudden, arrest records are found, court records are found. I'm excited, finally. Stecker holds up his cell phone to show the record of the call from Byrne. I literally found the outcome of the Bedford case out yesterday. He says Tuesday, April 25th, 2011, 2008, 10:18 a.m. Byrne told me for several things I didn't already know, says Stecker. He told me that Bedford never went before trial, which would explain why the court itself couldn't find records. Byrne only found the investigation records. It was presented before the court, but her attorney kept having it postponed. Every time after that, it was that she was mentally unfit to stand trial. She never appeared in court again. He couldn't find where she was remanded to psychiatric treatment by the court. One of the last articles covering the case states that on March the 4th, 1967, Lillian Bedford was sent to Norristown State Hospital by order of Judge Stanley M. Greenberg. The hospital can't, of course, confirm patients' records due to federal law. Charles can't obtain the records, says DA spokeswoman Tasha Jamerson. I know that Detective Byrne read him information over the phone, but as for physically obtaining the records, that's not something anything can do. Something anybody can do. Byrne confirmed for Stecker that Lillian Bedford died on January the 2nd, 1998. I don't feel sorry. The world lost a monster. Y'all know what I mean? When they have kids and they're on the thing. Exactly. About the outcome, it is what it is, Stecker says. All my life I've been told nothing ever happened to Lillian Bedford, but I never really fully believed it. It wasn't a shock. I don't have any animosity. She's passed away. It was a bit of closure, at least, finally hearing it directly from someone who saw the record. Now I know for sure. Now for the other puzzle piece, finding out how he and his brother ended up in Bedford's care. Between the bits of documentation he obtained in his mother and father's accounts, Stecker had tried to piece together his past, but his parents had divorced shortly after Eddie's death, offer conflicting versions of many events. Stecker was born in now demolished Naval Hospital, Philadelphia in 1962, the firstborn son of 21-year-old Marie Stecker, now Smith. His mother had a troubled childhood. His parents died when she was 9 years old. Then her grandmother died when she was 12. She was adopted by an aunt. My life went downhill after that, said Smith, age 70, from her home in Virginia. Smith grew up in the Strawberry Mansion section of the city, down the street from Stecker's father and namesake Charles Joseph Stecker Sr. After running away and spending the better part of her teen years in a school for troubled girls, she married Stecker. He was a cook for the Coast Guard. Right away they had Charles. 2 years later, Edward Eddie John, was born, followed by a baby girl named Donna. Paging through Stecker's family baby books, you wouldn't guess the tragic turn their lives would take. The penmanship looks like a teenager's lopsided scrawl. Charlie Jr. loves his brother Eddie very much. He especially likes to hold him with my help. Of course, wrote a then 23-year-old Smith on a page reserved for her son's year 2 milestone. Smith diligently recorded details such as the child's favorite vegetables and first attempts at standing up. The book reads like the record of an attentive, loving mother. It seems that way, doesn't it? Says Stecker, staring at the page. I don't know. Maybe she was trying then. But the book, like the rest of the documents, doesn't tell the whole story. By the time I was a year old, my birth mom had fractured my skull. By the time I was 2, she had knocked out my few teeth, says Stecker. Under a page titled Illnesses, there were 3 fractured skull entries. Fell out of a crib on my head. It's marked 463. Clumsiness is marked 1165. The third entry in different ink says fell. Yeah, they kept calling me clumsy, and it wasn't clumsy at all. Stecker believes the city intervened. DHS got involved because the Navy hospital caught the fact that I was coming back to the hospital with injuries routinely, he says. His mother insists it didn't happen that way, that he shouldn't believe what the papers say because they never talked to her. He thinks the state took him. No, they did not, counter Smith, who says she signed him over voluntarily, though she accuses her ex-husband of tricking her into giving up custody of her firstborn son. They put a paper in front of me, and my ex-husband had already signed it, says Smith. I didn't think to ask, what's this I'm signing? I signed my son over? They said something about abuse. I said, fine, she adds. Then it just snowballed after that. Smith denies beating her son. There was an accident that happened, and yes, he was hurt, she says over the phone. Chuck had fallen, and to this day I cannot remember what happened. Above the Stecker children, Charlie left Eddie, Wright, and Don. There's Charlie, and there's Eddie, there's Donna. There's the house where Eddie was killed in Germantown. Okay. So while Smith denies specific allegations of abuse, she will admit to the possibility of physical abuse in general terms, with the caveat that she wasn't alone. What happened at that time was not done by me alone. It's done by his father too. She says, making the point repeatedly, Smith feels she shoulders too much of the blame from the family for everything that's gone wrong. Meanwhile, Donna, who lives in New Jersey, believes a different version of the story. I was put in foster care when I was 2 months old because basically my butt looked like a raw hamburger, she says. She also says her father told her that her mother broke her eardrum. I've never been able to hear out of it, and I'm assuming that's true, she says. She's lying, says Smith. The decades long dispute over how the Stecker children ended up in foster care, and subsequently Eddie's death and the fallout, had poisoned the Stecker family tree. There's a whole big thing going on in the family here. Stems back to Eddie's death, says Smith, and I can't get all the pieces together. Donna refused to speak to Stecker. She doesn't like the fact that I talk about what happened. Donna doesn't speak to either of her parents. Stecker visits his biological father every few months out of obligation, but says he can't stand it. He wants to tell you about things you did wrong since the day you were born, says Stecker. Here's a man divorced from my mother for 46 years, and he's still complaining about things she did when they were married. Can you believe she shellacked my bongos? This was a few months ago. The family situation became volatile when Stecker first started posting his story on the internet in the early days of deciding to become an advocate. I put the story on MySpace about 5 years ago, and all heck broke loose. Stecker says Donna stopped talking to him when I told her what I was doing with all the stuff. Said I was doing everything I was doing for personal gain. I know this sounds horrible, but here he's been using my brother's death for years as a means of getting attention, says Donna. That's what a lot of people in the family would say, just let it be, just let it go. But a lot of these things will continue to happen if we don't just sweep it under the rug. We don't need to do that. Charlie is no way just bringing attention to himself. He's trying to bring attention to child abuse awareness. That's what he's doing, y'all. I know it sounds horrible. Okay, let me go on further down. Um, but he's been using my brother's death for years as a means of getting attention. It's a tragedy, but he needs to let it rest. He's devoting his life to his brother, Eddie. I personally think it's wrong. If this is his way of dealing with it, they could deal with it, but I said, leave me out of it. My abuse days are over. Stecker didn't see or speak to his mother for about 14 years, though they recently started communicating via text message, frequently quibbling over the details of biographical information that he posts on his page. I said, Chuck, you're making me look like trash on Facebook. And I don't like that because that's not the way it happened, says Smith. Still, she says she supports her son and wants to bridge the gap. She says she hopes he finds the records to settle some scores. She also supports his dream of being a voice for other abused kids. Chuck is trying to do what he couldn't do for himself as a kid, Smith said. Philadelphia foster and adoption records from the late 1800s to 1970 are stored in the Urban Archives section of Temple University Library. Last week, Stecker met with representatives of Turning Point for Children, the agency created when Children's Aid Society and Philadelphia Society for Services to Children merged, requesting permission to obtain his record. In a few weeks, he'll have another answer, but not all the answers. They will not release his record to him. I said, they will release his record to him, but not Eddie's. Donna said she could care less. When Charles, Edward, and Donna first arrived in foster care, they were placed together with temporary foster parents. Press reports indicate that on February 15th, 1967, Charles and Eddie were moved to the home of Donald and Lillian Bedford at 29 East Seymour Street in Germantown. For whatever reason, Smith says, the Bedfords only wanted boys, so maybe Donna stayed behind. Don Bedford was a 45-year-old house painter. Lillian was a 42-year-old housewife. Married 13 years, they had no children of their own. The couple received 24 a week for each child. Social workers introduced us to our new mommy and daddy. We called Stecker. When we went in, there were toys and a crib ready for us. It seemed like a good place to be to a 4-year-old. 13 days later, my brother was murdered and my left arm was shattered, he says. Stecker extends his arm as far as it can go, about 5 inches shy and straight. Thick, dark Hebrew script is tattooed onto his forearm. It means true servant, a concept that summarizes Stecker's life, calling to help others. Beneath the tattooed skin, steel pins and plates hold the bones together. Stecker recalls being terrified at the Bedford home. When Don was around, everything was peaceful and nice and friendly. But when he wasn't home, she would scare us, he says. If you cried, you would get hit. Whatever you did, it was like Jekyll and Hyde. She would hide behind the stairs and scare us, grabbing our ankles, yelling, Boogeyman! In interviews with police after Eddie's death, little Chucky said his foster mother held their heads under faucets and beat them with sticks. Wow. You name it, says Stecker. Go to bed and you'll be ripped out of your bed. In the tub, the hot water faucets will be turned on. Evil stuff. Dr. Joseph Spellman, the city's medical examiner at the time, told authorities the bruises associated with parental punishment on Eddie's body suggested that he had been mistreated physically for some time leading up to the fatal blow. The report also indicated he had been struck. Let's see if there's more on, because that's an advertisement there. So let me go over to okay. It's over there now. So repeatedly for a day or so before his death. Lillian Bedford confessed, though not right away. According to a published account of the events, Mrs. Bedford at first had maintained that Edward had fallen from his crib, but his mother Charles told them my new mommy had hit him. But his brother Charles had told them my new mommy hit me. Bedford was arrested for involuntary manslaughter and assault. Author Joe McGinnis, then a popular Inquirer columnist, wrote the only public narrative of Don Bedford's life after his wife's arrest. In McGinnis' portrait, Don Bedford staggers through his day and swigging whiskey and sobbing, a broken man who loved his wife and always wanted children of his own. Believe it or not, Bedford told McGinnis she's a something fine woman, and I wish you could have seen how wonderful. I'm not going to read that part again because no, she wasn't a wonderful person. McGinnis summarized the husband's dilemma. It's not easy for him to decide what to do. At first, he hated her. He had waited all his life for children, and she had killed them when they first came. He could have walked out and said, "The heck with life," and cried out to a new life. Instead, he hired the best lawyer he could get. Okay. The Bedfords hired A. Charles Peruto, a local courtroom legend. The 84-year-old retired attorney still is in town, which he's deceased now. But when this article was aired, he did. Stecker says that he periodically tried to contact Peruto and his son Peruto Jr., well known for representing reputed mob boss Joey Perlino. What do you think of that? So he also of Joey Perlino for details of the beating death. I was told he didn't want anything to do with the case, says Stecker. Turns out Peruto simply doesn't remember. You're not telling me anything that strikes a bell, says Peruto during a recent telephone conversation. I tell you, I stopped counting murder cases that I've had when I hit the magic number 333. Otherwise, you see bodies in your sleep for crying out loud. Excuse me, Randolph E. Wise, the Welfare Department Commissioner in 1967, was widely quoted describing Eddie Stecker's death as the first of its kind in the history of the city's foster parent program. But in April 1966, another 2-year-old died while living in the Bedfords, and though murder was not proven, it should have been a big enough red flag to disqualify the couple from the foster program. Press reports indicate that Brent Chuck Garcia, what his nickname was, Chuck, see, had suffered a severe bruise on his scalp, but an autopsy on the Garcia boy failed to determine either the cause of death or how the child died. Bedford claimed that Garcia's death was a result of him accidentally falling off a rocking horse. The medical examiner's office determined it could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the boy was murdered. A letter was sent to the welfare department clearing the Bedfords. They were re-registered as foster parents. The Stecker boys arrived 10 months later. Declared in the 66 case, foster mother is held in death to a second child, was a headline of an Inquirer article reporting that Eddie's death ignited a fresh look into the death of Garcia. But after that article, like with Don and Lillian Bedford, the public record trail gets cold. It's regrettable, continued Wise in the article, but he said it was difficult to pinpoint where we erred. Wise admitted that his department did not see Garcia's autopsy report and took the medical examiner's exoneration of the Bedfords, who passed a background check at face value. Stecker can't get over the negligence. What happened to my brother is bad enough, he says, but the level of irresponsibility on the part of the city to put 2 more boys in the care of people who had a questionable record at its best is mind-boggling. Okay, so Stecker recalls being told about his brother's death, while recovering at the hospital from the broken bones inflicted by his foster mom. His tiny body, he was almost a small, excuse me, a small child for his age, a peanut, he says, was encased in thick plaster cast. My natural father had no bedside manner. He said, "Your brother's dead." And for what dead meant to me, I don't know. After getting out of the hospital and then rehab 4 months after Eddie's death in June of 1967, Stecker was reunited with his sister Donna at an orphanage in Frankfurt section of Philadelphia. That August, they were placed with the Brophy family in Overbrook, where they spent 5.5 awesome years. They're part of the reason I am who I am today, says Stecker. But he had to leave. In the sixth grade, he was sent to live with Coguts in Mayfair for a year. Then in 1974, he was sent to St. Francis Home for Boys for 2 years. At the time, the program was run by Father Peter Dunn, who was later diagnosed a as an untreatable pedophile. Oh my goodness, y'all! You see that? He was then put in the program that's run by Father Peter Dunn, who was later diagnosed as untreatable pedophile. That's not surprising. In July of 1976, 13-year-old Stecker was returned to his biological mother. A bad decision, he says. I remember the verbal abuse and threats. You should have died with your brother, says Stecker. Asked about this allegation, Smith loses her cool. That I will dispute. I would never wish any of my kids dead. I'm a very calm person. I've got a bad side too that I left in Philadelphia. The list of allegations Stecker had was against his mother is long. She kicked him in the groin so hard he required surgery. She made him watch pornography with one of her boyfriends. She attacked a friend and broke his ankle. Smith had a response for each episode. To, her son had surgery to correct a congenital defect. She doesn't allow for it in her house, in my home, and she did it. Wouldn't have been where the kids could see it. If she broke a kid's ankle, he would have sued her, wouldn't he? I don't want to make my son out to be a liar, she says. I wasn't a perfect parent. At that point, my frame of mind was not the way it was supposed to be. Yes, exactly, there, lady. At 18 years old, pushed to the brink, Stecker left his mother's house for good. He joined the Coast Guard. As a young adult, he lived a regular enough life. He met a woman, he fell in love, got married, had a baby, got divorced, got married, and divorced again. He lived in New Jersey to be near his daughter, swearing he would never abandon her. He tried to be a normal person, but he says a burden of his experiences shine through in small, odd ways. It was wild watching the news, reading the newspapers, and seeing my life experiences still happening around me and feeling incapacitated to do anything, he says. He wonders if what he witnessed affected him and what he doesn't realize. I always say if I had to kill to eat, I would be a vegetarian. I don't do dead. Me and dead just don't work out. Maybe that stems back to what happened to my brother. After growing up, hopscotching through houses that were never quite homes, Stecker's back in Philadelphia, living just blocks from the demolished hospital where he was born. This past February 28th, 44 years to the day of Eddie's death, Stecker returned to the house on Seymour Street. The owner, who knows Stecker from his planting flowers along the fence every year, let him look around inside. The house is being gutted for renovation, but the owner set the bathtub where Bedford washed and the blood off Eddie aside for Stecker. He wants to use it as a planter on his lawn in South Philly. I felt at peace, he says, about walking through the house. When I walked down the house, I almost felt energized, like I was 20 feet tall, to find out the ending of that portion. Move on. Stecker's excited about the new phase of his life. He's in the process of getting Charlie's Angels up and running. Then envisions a movie. He's not giving up on the paper chase, on finding the puzzle pieces that will allow him to finally view the big picture. I'm working on getting records released to me, he says. I want that file. It's just a matter of making the right friends, and I will. Stecker says after all these years, he's finally ready. He knows better than to expect a tidy resolution like closure or justice. All he wants is information. Y'all, please, for the sake, for this story and all, please go and sign the petition. we greatly appreciate everyone that does that. You don't have to give a donation, but a donation will help him fight more. You don't have to give a donation. Sharing it on across different media sites will be wonderful. But this story is hard to fathom and to read. I know Charlie. He is a reputable guy. He is respectful. He deserves his story told. He deserves justice. He deserves to get out there. The system is broken. I want to thank each and every one of y'all for coming to, let's see, and when they have kids, their own. Thanks. Yeah. And remember, there was also not too far from around that area was a boy in a box. Y'all remember that? I don't know if they ever found the murderer of that boy in a box. And guess what? That was around that area as well. The deceased boy in a box. Um, and then I think there was another little girl that was murdered as well in an area around the same age. But this is basically his story, and but it could be some of the people who she harmed as well. Thank you all, and God bless. Please share this. You are right, absolutely right. So please don't forget to hit the thumbs up so it will be passed around. This video, YouTube will recognize it more so, and maybe more people will get that out there and help Charlie to get these things signed, these petitions. He deserves answers. He deserves the people that's in politics to stand up. People in politics, come on, stand up over there in Philadelphia. Come over there, come on and help this guy out. Help him. Y'all say that y'all want to work for the people. Work for Charlie. Work for his brother. Don't just say what you want to do. Come on and do it. Show us. Do the facts. Help this case out. He deserves it. So thank you so much and God bless.